Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to have a chat about, well, I guess, kind of putting your money where your mouth is when it comes to defending free speech and free expression rather than just saying you're for it. We're going to talk about some organizations and things you can donate to or join up to in order to make these kind of things happen. So just quickly before we start, I want to give a definition of what censorship is that I agree with. Rin can say her point of view. Rin's got a YouTube channel, which she'll pimp in a sec, that you can go and subscribe to. Tackle similar subjects to me, but from a bit of a different point of view. So censorship. This is the definition of censorship according to the ACLU. Now, they may have shifted ground a bit more recently, but this is a pretty good definition. Censorship is the suppression of words, images, or ideas that are offensive. It happens whenever some people succeed in imposing their personal, political, or moral values on others. Censorship can be carried out by the government as well as private pressure groups. Censorship by the government is unconstitutional in the United States. In contrast, when private individuals or groups organize boycotts against stores that sell magazines of which they disapprove, their actions are protected by the First Amendment, although they can become dangerous in the extreme. Private pressure groups, not the government, promulgated and enforced the infamous Hollywood blacklists during the McCarthy period, but these private censorship campaigns are best countered by groups and individuals speaking out and organizing in defense of the threatened expression. So censorship is not just when it comes from the government. America is somewhat unique in having protections, but I think we all need to be watchful and careful about these things, as it's increasingly obvious for people all over the political spectrum lately. So Rin, do you want to say hi and tell people about your channel, and then let's get into it?
Hello, everybody. My name is Rin Michaelis, and I have a variety channel. I talk about all sorts of things from A to Z. I talk about anime. I talk about books. I talk about everything. It's very, very much a variety channel. You know, like recently I talked about Martin Luther. I talk about everything.
Yeah, and I hosted I think it was that video, wasn't it, on my channel for you. So if you want a taster, you can go back through my archives and see the video that I put up. So where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, I do have a few list of free speech organizations like the National Coalition Against Censorship. It's because we talk about it all the time, you know. There are people out there who would talk about free speech for 2 years, but you never ever really see any links or anything like that.
Yeah, so the National Coalition Against Censorship is ncac.org. Let's see, how do they describe themselves? Their mission is to promote freedom of thought, inquiry, and expression, and to oppose censorship in all its forms. So they seem to have a fairly big focus on schools, education as a whole, artists, direct campaigning with public officials, that sort of thing. So they seem kind of organizationally involved. So is that where you think there should be a lot of emphasis on free expression? I mean, the arguments that people have, I don't think we're dismissing that as not being useful, but it's just that organizations like this have experience and expertise, actually pulling the levers of culture and government and so on. And so it can be more effective to support them, right?
Yeah, it could. I mean, it's like we do talk about free speech all the time. I think that it would be great if we could do something about it because, I mean, with feminists, they do get things done. I mean, feminists want to censor people and make everybody shut up. They have no problem with getting with organizations, talking to their legislators, their senators, their congressmen. They are getting shit done. And if we're going to turn the tides, we need to start organizing and start getting things done.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the whole landscape has changed. I mean, I started by just taking the description from the ACLU, but the ACLU has started to back away from some of their more strident free speech positions. They've started to not help people, and they were famous in the past for being the people who supported far right to march and so on. But the culture seems to be changing at the ACLU, which is, I mean, nobody really, well, apart from fascists themselves, nobody really wants to support fascists, but they still have rights. And the ACLU used to have this kind of absolutist position on free speech, which is being eroded. So, donations and so on, if they were more organized, could be used perhaps to encourage them back to that more strong viewpoint.
I think it's because there are people who are pro censorship or at least pro social justice that has given the ACLU even more money. So it seems like when they had to choose between their beliefs and money, they pick money over their beliefs.
Yeah, I think some of it's the kind of people, the volunteers that go into it, because people's whole concept of free expression seems to have changed as well, which is why I think something like this National Coalition Against Censorship might be a good one to support, because they're interested in education.
Yeah, I mean, I did find quite a few of them. Like, I mean, it's kind of like there are so many things that I found on Twitter. Like, I found Banned Books Week and and I also found a Free Speech Week, and I don't want to get the dates mixed up. So let me just search it right quick to get the mixture. I get the dates right.
Yeah.
Free Speech Week. I found it. Free Speech Week this year would be from October the 21st through October the 27th.
Okay, October's quite a way away, so maybe some of us who are pro free speech could organize some things for then. I don't know, like telethon live streams or something, and find some organizations that we think are worth supporting. I mean, a lot of the stuff we're going to cover here is probably going to be America focused, because Americans are far more pro free speech, and it's a lot more difficult to find groups focused on that in the UK, at least of any size, and Europe as well, because there's a different approach. We don't have the same constitutional protection. People aren't as invested in it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I was thinking of like, what can we do to make a difference? And so I was just looking at all of these free speech groups, and that's where I found Free Speech Week. And Free Speech Week is an annual, nonpartisan, non-ideological celebration of the values of freedom of speech and of the press.
Yeah. If I could give a UK organization, there's one called defendfreespeech.org.uk if you want to find the site. So you're probably aware of the porn censorship that's coming in the UK very, very soon. That's been kind of overshadowed by all the Brexit fuss. But it's not just porn. They also have threatened very vague kind of concepts like esoteric content or extremist content. But what does extremist mean? It's not defined. Terrorists, sure. What about political activists? Some religious groups, some anti-religious groups, trade unionists. Yeah, who is covered by that? So it's not just porn that people are reluctant to defend that's under threat. It's a lot of other forms of speech and content on the internet which they're gathering the powers to themselves to just kind of cut off or put behind not just a paywall but an identity wall, because you'll have to buy a pass in order to get hold of some of this material. Jerry Barnett. Sorry, go on.
Are you talking about Title 9? Is it Title 9? Where if you have to pay a fine if you share a link?
That's EU legislation, and there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about that going around. This is UK law. So this is specifically to the UK. We're basically having a blanket, not a porn ban, but a control of porn and other content where you'll have to have it's like an online age ID thing to go in. It's corrupt as hell, and yeah. But so defendfreespeech.org.uk seems to be worried about that. Jerry Barnett, Porn Panic on Twitter, I think. He's an anti-censorship campaigner. These are good people to follow on this stuff. But it's basically too late to stop it now, so we need to start campaigning to roll it back. But yeah, it's a different situation here and in Europe.
Yeah, and I think that I heard, but I mean, I would think that this is an EU thing and probably not a British thing. But from what I hear is that people in Europe cannot criticize immigration. And if you could, like me and Maudwin talk about it, like if you criticize immigration, you could go to jail for it.
It does depend to an extent, but yeah, it's a kind of interesting situation. You've got governments, like most, particularly in this instance, the German government, they haven't brought in censorship laws or rules. What they've done is they've gone kind of around the back door almost to groups like Facebook and said, yeah, if you don't control this kind of content, we will bring in legislation. And so all the social media companies have just basically folded. There are legitimate non-racist, non-xenophobic cases to be made, both for and against immigration. But we've got into this weird position with this quasi-political censorship where governments don't have to actually do any changes to the laws to constrict your speech. They can just threaten these social media near monopolies, and they'll fall in line. So yeah, that's an issue. For the record, I am not particularly against immigration, but I think that people who are critics should have the right to speak about it.
Yeah, because sometimes me and Maudwin and whatnot, we tackle difficult subjects in Maudwin's House of Fun.
Yeah. And you can find that your videos are restricted in Europe and so on, or various countries in Europe, depending on the content. The articles that you were on about was Article 13 and I think Article 11. It's the new copyright directive. So that's more they talk about the link tax and so on. It's a very complicated mess and far too complex to go into while we just have a chat. But if people want to look it up, they can get the full texts and things and read them online. It's not too tricky to find it.
Yeah, and another thing that I have on me is Banned Books Week. Banned Books Week, let's see, will be held from September 23rd through September 29th. Well, they haven't updated it yet because they're still talking about 2018. I hope they haven't quit. Maybe they don't have the new time yet, but I do think stuff that gets other people involved in doing something about censorship. I do think things like that would be great.
Apparently, it's always the last week of September and has been held since 1982. So I imagine they're still going.
Oh, so it's the Banned Book week is the last week of September every year.
Yeah, so that's something else we could participate in if people are up for it. I could do some readings or something maybe. So it looks like it would be 23rd of September through 29th of September, most likely.
Yeah, because right here it says 2018, so they didn't update it yet. However, if they're still around, we could, just participate so that people could see how important free speech is. And I think it's great that it's nonpartisan because it was never partisan before. In fact, I mean, if I recall correctly, there was a time where the left cared about free speech and the religious right tried to censor people. You know, the right tried to, censor people because, I mean, of Jesus and whatnot. They didn't like people spreading atheism.
Yeah. I mean, we've had an issue with that here in the UK. There's been massive outcry in the Muslim community in Birmingham over the LGBT education in schools there, threatening to take their kids out of school, holding mass protests. It's an interesting conundrum for the left, I think. Do they continue to support free speech and LGBT rights, or do they place their concerns for the culturally Muslim community over that? It's been interesting to watch people's reactions to all.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, I was watching Till Pool talking about it. I think he talked about it in his, I forget if he talked about it on his main channel or on his alternatives channel, but I mean, I could tell that Tim Pool was having fun with it because it's like he was mentioning, like, the left's narrative about tolerance and acceptance, and it's like, are you going to be tolerant of the Muslims and their really conservative views, or are you going to continue with LGBT education? Because for the longest of time, people in the anti-feminist community, if you want to call it that, or the skeptics, whatever label, well, you know which group I'm talking about. Yeah. For a long time, people have been saying that Muslims are very, very conservative. Like, normally people would consider them to be far right, They are strongly against gay marriage. They are strongly against it. But the feminists, the intersectional feminists, they're taking it too. They want to be pro-Muslim and pro-LGBT. But in these countries, being gay is criminalized. Being gay is outlawed. But what you have is people rationalizing, well, they would say things like, well, the people didn't have a choice. It's the government, not the people. It's like, but if the people were strongly against it, if enough people were strongly against it, I believe that they could overthrow the governments. But I mean, that's what I'm thinking. And it's something it has been illegal for decades or centuries or whatnot, then there's a good chance that's it's ingrained in them. So when they come over to England, well, of course they're still going to be anti-LGBT, and people have been saying that for a long time. When people look at the Quran is anti-gay, and people have been saying this, but the feminists don't listen. So I just really loved Tim Pool's sarcasm. I mean, I really love it. I get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really that long ago that there was censorship from the government affecting homosexuality, LGBT stuff in the UK. So infamously, it was Section 28, which was announced in 1988. So we're talking, pretty modern, really. And that said that local authorities, so that included schools, shall not intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality, or promote the teaching in any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship, and so on. This wasn't repealed until 2000 in Scotland, and in the rest of the United Kingdom in 2003. So, we're into the 21st century before that restriction was lifted. So it's only been 15 years, and it seems like that attitude is creeping back. So we kind of defeated conservative Christians censoring LGBT content in education, only in 2003, and now we've got this massive campaign, and it is massive, by lots of Muslim parents and the Christians again trying to bring this kind of restriction back so that we can't teach kids about LGBT rights in schools. It's yeah, it's not good, is it?
No, not really, but this is where simple sarcasm, it just really got me. It's like, oh, do you want to be tolerant of other cultures, or do you want to force your culture onto the Muslims? So it's like, it's really funny. I just thought it was really funny because you also see, feminists being outraged over anime, but it's kind of like diversity. Aren't you supposed to be pro-diversity?
Yeah.
It's like, so I mean, I just don't like feminism at all. I mean, as you guys could tell, I'm no fan of feminism. I think that intersectional feminism is the worst one.
It's actually almost physically painful for me to see what the left has become when it comes to this free speech issues, and because I still consider myself on the left, but to watch this kind of thing happening, this this thing in particular, this LGBT content in schools, just it's so obvious, the contradiction and the incapability of dealing with it. Because they don't have anymore a clear principle on free expression when it comes to this. I think the solution is actually fairly easy. Have the lessons, and if the parents want their kids not to attend the lesson, give them the option, which we already do with religious education and assemblies and things. If you don't want your kid to go, to attend a religious class or a sex education class or something, you can inform the school that you don't want them to take part, and they can go off and do homework in the library or something. There's no need to change the policy. Just give the parents the option. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, I was thinking about what you were saying earlier about why you didn't get along with certain progressives. And you said that the reason why you don't get along with them is because they are very authoritarian. And, it's like I was really thinking about it. And you're right. And subsequently, I was also like reading this book by Voste called SJW's Always Law. And he was very different then than he is now or whatever, because now it looks like Voste is part of the alt-right, but when he wrote the book, he was against racism. Like if you read the book, he actually speaks out against racism frequently. But I mean, when I was reading SJW's Always Law, and it's like it's amazing the authoritarianism of it, where they try to go around and try to silence people who disagree with them.
Yeah, it's on a lot of these cultural arguments. I think the left won the argument. So why is everyone so scared of continuing to have the discussions and the debates? It's like they've won free speech for their ideas, and now they want to shut down other people, and that's hypocritical to me. I mean, I'm still left wing because I think the left wing still has the right arguments and the right information and data when it doesn't overstep and become anti-science and so on. I don't understand the terror of actually having to defend your position rather than shutting people up. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between you and progressives, and that is they are authoritarian, whereas you seem to be more. Wait a minute, are you an anarcho-communist?
No, I'm an anarcho-technocrat, which is a very obscure thing, but I only hold anarchism as an ideal, as a kind of utopian ideal. It's the thing I would like the most, voluntarism and so on, but I recognize that it's not possible in the current paradigm. So pragmatically, I'm more of a socialist in the proper sense of the term, not the Marxist sense of the term.
Oh, so you're not an anarchist?
Ideologically, I am, but I don't think it's possible until you achieve a post-scarcity society. So pragmatically, I think the best I can hope for is socialism, by which I mean decent social investment, use collective public money to provide people with opportunities via education and so on, and to provide a certain baseline safety net. So I believe in equality of opportunity and equal rights.
Yeah, well, I an equal opportunity, but I wouldn't call myself a socialist. I'm more of a centrist. And we're more in favor of a mixed economy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think capitalism does certain things very well, and it raises a lot of wealth. But then how we choose to spend that to support our society and provide a decent baseline and invest in education, make sure that everyone has the opportunity to rise to the maximum level that their ability will allow, I think that requires social investment. And I don't want newly emerging hierarchies. I think that one of the problems we've got in our more laissez-faire capitalist systems at the moment is that money and hence power tends to accumulate in very few hands, and that distorts our democratic structures and so on. So I think we need certain state interventions and corrections, because the only thing that can compete on the same level as some of these big multinational corporations and so on is a government. But we're kind of off track there.
So. Yeah, we did get off track. I forgot where we left off. I can't remember where we left off.
Do you want to move on to another site then that you've raised?
Yeah, we talked about the National Coalition Against Censorship. I need to go through my Twitter because it's going to be longer without my computer. But as you already know, I'm having internet problems. Okay, the other one on Twitter is IFRT, which is the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable. Do you want and I found that one recently. I found that one very recently, but I just figured that we should just be aware of all of these free speech groups, because we were talking about the ACLU earlier and how they deviated away from free speech. It is nice to have a contingency plan, a backup plan, where if one fails, if one just doesn't live up to its free speech reputation, then there is a contingency plan.
Yeah. So the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable seems very linked with the library system in the US.
Yeah, the American Library Association, because that's what I've seen most often when it comes to free speech, is that most of them are related to the library.
Yeah, it seems like it's a subgroup within the American Library Association.
Okay, wait a minute. Hold on. Now, let me just do all of the ones that are affiliated with the American Library Association, because many of them are there are many affiliates. So okay, the American Library Association, OIF. The Office for Intellectual Freedom is part of the American Library Association. Follow for library news about privacy, banned books, and censorship. So what you do is you go to Twitter and you go at OIF, and they are about intellectual freedom. Then there is Freedom to Read Foundation, and their Twitter is at FTRF. And I'll read the description. The Freedom to Read Foundation is a First Amendment legal association, First Amendment legal organization affiliated with the American Library Association. Then there is the ABFE. The Twitter is at FREADOM. It is the American Booksellers for Free Expression at ABA, the booksellers' voice in the fights against censorship. So mostly seeing ones related to the books and related to the American Library Association. That was the large chunk of what I was able to find.
Cool.
I hardly ever seen anything related to the internet. They are nearly non-existent.
Yeah. And libraries are an undervalued resource lately, I think, and it's worth supporting your local library by, just going, taking out books or whatever. People think the internet has replaced it, but a lot of rare texts you can't get online, and your local library should be able to order for you. Of course, the problem there is that there is a record of it, so if you're into anything dodgy, you've got to be careful because that's being watched over. But with this ban and so on coming in the UK, which will include esoteric content, it might actually be easier if you're into the occult or anything like that to get those books and information from your library. They should be able to order in anything that you need. So libraries might see a resurgence, but they're still worth your support because libraries, librarians, authors, book collectors, and so on, they're all generally pro-free expression. So they're worth your support. That's something local and practical you can do, I think.
I think I gave you all of the links I had. Like I did send you Project Censored earlier.
Yeah. Was it Project Censored? Yeah, that's a Twitter account, isn't it? Yeah, so it's at Project Censored, and projectcensored.org is their website. So their objective is quite interesting. Besides First Amendment issues and the advocacy of free press rights, they have a focus on training students in media literacy. So understanding the media, what it's trying to tell you, that sort of thing. Now, it was kind of a joke when I was in college, but I studied media in college, communication studies, it was called. And that was always considered like a joke to do it. Media studies, what are you going to do? Watch TV. But it was actually really useful. I'm part of Generation X, and we're deeply cynical of advertising and so on anyway. But those classes have stuck with me. The sort of the way we learned to analyze it. It wasn't through a lens in the way that critical analysis is, but just you watch a show and there's an advertising break in the middle of the show, right? And you can look at the adverts, what kind of adverts they are, who they're appealing to, and you can figure out what kind of demographic they think watches that particular show. And it's quite interesting. It's almost like a vaccination jab against media manipulation. So I think education is actually a really good thing to focus on in these groups. Democracy depends on an informed populace, not a misinformed populace. So if you can be aware of when media or news stories or presentation or choice of language or whatever is trying to control you, you can gain the tools by analyzing it so that it doesn't affect you too badly. So, yeah, let's see.
Wait a minute. TV gives you commercials based off what they believe is watching their show?
Yeah, it's much more targeted on the internet, obviously, to the point where people who haven't had that kind of training can notice. You'll notice that particular adverts show up constantly in your Facebook feed or whatever based upon your internet activity. But TV shows, yeah, they target people. They think, okay, who's going to watch Game of Thrones? Probably going to be, I'm just guessing here off the top of my head, but probably going to be a primarily male audience, aged teens through to mid-30s probably. So you might see a lot of adverts for cars or computer games, that sort of thing. But you can work it back the other way. You can figure out what demographic they think is watching by looking at the adverts, and thinking to yourself, okay, who is this meant to appeal to? What kind of thing is it? But yeah, advertising, man, they spend so much money researching and targeting adverts. Even it's cheaper on the internet, but much more targeted. And it kind of gives you just a way of stepping back and intellectualizing what you're watching and understanding how it is the way it is.
Oh, it's definitely targeted over the internet because it's like my Amazon Kindle since they send me advertisements for things that I recently bought. Like I would buy some muscle milk, and then Amazon Kindle would suddenly advertise muscle milk, something I would recently buy, or it's kind of like I would recently buy some, essential oils like lavender oil, and the next thing my Amazon Kindle is advertising essential oils. And it's like, you are advertising me things that I just bought, which is very, very creepy.
Well, they think you might buy more, you see. And it's weird, the correlations that go on. I mean, they say that about political views. You know, if someone gives you maybe 2 political views, you can predict what their position is likely to be on lots of other things. And it's kind of the same with products and so on. Sometimes I don't mind because it does throw up things that I am genuinely interested in and would like to buy. Sometimes it's wildly off. Well, that's amusing too.
But it's amazing how well it's targeted towards you. Kind of like how I saw like an advertisement for Penny Dreadful, well, years ago. Like obviously the show is over now, but back when Penny Dreadful was more, while it was ongoing, or back when it was new, I would receive advertisements for Penny Dreadful, and I enjoyed the show. So it's amazing how spots on it is. Like it really does seem to really get inside your head and know which type of person you are. Like it seems like they really do the, I don't know, psychoanalysts really well, because like I really did enjoy Penny Dreadful. I mean, I didn't like the ending. I thought the ending sucked, but I really loved it.
Now, Project Censored is international, so that's one that a lot of people could support. So they provide their services to the United States, Canada, UK, and the rest of the world. So they're very much focused on educating students and the public about the importance of free press, democratic self-government, expose and oppose news censorship, promote independent investigative journalism, media literacy, and critical thinking. So that sounds like a good one to support.
Oh, and of course, I think most people have heard of FIRE.
Yeah, no, FIRE's an interesting one because they're constantly being decried as being right-wing, which is kind of peculiar.
Well, the right gets censored more than the left.
That's changing now, I think. If you're paying attention to Twitter over the last week or two, there's been some high-profile people censored. I think some of that's down to brigading, which seems to have made a comeback on Twitter as an effective tactic. But and a bunch of far-left news organizations on Facebook just recently got culled. So, it's come for them, this thing they've been advocating for some time.
Yeah, it's just, like I wish I could feel really bad for it, but it feels so karmic. Like they've been trying to get, other people censored for, a long time, that it seems like poetic justice.
In a way, it's hard to be sympathetic when they've been ignoring all of these outrages up till now.
No, it's not that they've been ignoring. It's that, it's kind of, there's this thing that progressives do that I find really, really annoying. Like where they try to get rid of Sargon, for example. And then after they do everything they could to get rid of Sargon, they're like, hey, Sargon, we just got censored. Help us out. And it's like, why, you little son of a? Or it's like it would be like Bering would get this too. Bering, Count Dankula, they would do everything they could to flag them down, get rid of them from Twitter, get rid of them from Facebook, and then as soon as this happens to them, it's like, we want your help. Sargon, make a video talking about this. Baron can make a video talking about it. Stand by your principles and help us. It's like, why, you little son of a bitch?
I think we should stand by our principles. But yeah, They are little bitches about it, aren't they? It's I shouldn't be always so upset by hypocrisy as I am, because in order to be a hypocrite, you have to at least try to do the right thing, but fail. But nothing aggravates me so much as hypocrisy. Yeah, Fire's had some criticism for who it is that funds it, and they do also talk about things like religious liberty, which people think is a dog whistle for religious censorship and so on. Yeah, I'm an anti-theist, quite a vociferous one, but I think the religious should still be able to discuss their beliefs and so on, and I should be able to criticize them. You know, it goes two ways. I'm secure in my belief that I can beat their arguments, so I don't see anything to be scared of there particularly. It does get complicated around things like wedding cakes and so on, though. You know, which rights have supremacy and which ones don't, and how far freedom of association goes. But yeah.
Well, I'm not a huge fan of freedom of association because, I mean, for me, I'm kind of like a more bake the cake. You know, like, to me, I don't think it has to be a particular cake, but I mean, I do think about how things could go wrong. Like, if there's another Great Depression and people are hungry and people are starving, I don't think that's, you know, thinking about the worst things that things could go. I wouldn't want people to starve. Like, sure, right now we have plenty of food, and so far, you know, with all the food we have, a person could easily go to another restaurant. However, if there's a food shortage and a restaurant has food, I wouldn't want somebody who's scared to starve. So I do think that they should be able to eat. You know, you can't just send a person away without food or without water.
Yeah, I mean, it seems trivial and it seems silly when you look at the gay wedding cake issues. You know, they could just go to another baker or whatever. But these rules stem from things that happened in the past, like forcing people to use different drinking fountains if they were of a different race, or, you know, signs on pubs or bars saying, you know, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs, things like that. People shouldn't be excluded from anywhere on that basis, and that's why the rules have tended to come down the way that they have. I mean, it might be trivial in a time where people are mostly tolerant and so on, but if you're going to allow people not to prepare a cake for a gay couple, you know, at what point do you say something isn't okay? You know, is it okay then for a baker not to bake for a Pakistani family because they're racist against Pakistanis, or whatever else it might be, not to,
or black people,
not to cater a humanist funeral or something, a wake. At what, you know, where's your line where it's not okay? And I think it's better to err on the side of caution there and say bake the goddamn cake.
Yeah, I also am all for, you know, bake the cake. I mean, it doesn't have to be a gay wedding cake. It could just be a plain white cake. But to me, it's like, I do think, what's the worst could happen?
Yeah.
Like, what if there's another Great Depression? What if food is scarce and you're the only baker, like you're the only one that could, you know, give us food? It's like, I mean, worst case scenario, people need you for food. I don't think that you should let people starve. Or if, you know, what if the gay person is very poor and you're close to his home and he goes to you because you're closest to his home? I mean, should the gay person starve, or I don't know. I mean, at certain points, it becomes inhumane. Like, could gas stations start refusing people? Could, you know, like a Muslim person who runs the gas station goes, no, we don't serve gays, go elsewhere. But then it's kind of like, if that person is almost out of gas and the next gas station is miles away, that would mean that their car would perhaps break it down. And then it's kind of like, who knows what could happen. So I always think in terms of worst case scenario, because of course, when things are good, you could take it all for granted.
Yeah, and yeah, people on both sides don't really think too much about this. I mean, it is mean to pick on small bakers and sue them in these high-profile sort of national level cases when they don't agree to do what you want them to do. But it's also unfair of them to deny service. So yeah, it gets nuanced. You got another site?
Yeah, I just don't think it has to be a gay wedding cake in particular. No, they do have the religious rights, so it doesn't have to be a gay wedding cake, but you could get them a plain and white cake, and the gay people could always write their own names on it.
Yeah. I don't see particularly how it infringes on their religious rights, though. I mean, it's not saying that they have to approve of the wedding, or they have to attend, or they have to have gay sex themselves. It's just, they're paid to make a cake. But yeah, anyway. You got any other sites? I've got a couple I've looked up that are worth talking about, I think.
Oh, we could talk about the sites you found.
Okay. One of the main ones I think is really important is, well, the internet is the most obvious battleground for talking about all these issues. And the internet is where a lot of this censorship is happening now, whether it's happening at the corporate level or the government level. And one organization has been really consistent in fighting this kind of stuff since the inception of the internet, and that's the Electronic Frontier Foundation. So they're well worth supporting. And a lot of the internet infrastructure is run from the United States. So even for people outside the States, yeah, it's worth supporting American groups and the EFF. So yeah, it's EFF.org. They do all kinds of things like campaigning for fixing of security holes, arguing against the incoming copyright directives in Europe. They're in favor of an open and free internet without different services being streamed and so on. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, and they're just a general good news site if you want to keep up on things that are going on. So let's just looking at their front page right now. There's an interesting article about the link between modern free speech law and the civil rights movement, which kind of gives the context like we were talking about with the wedding cakes. Mark Zuckerberg has put out things saying that he's embracing privacy and security fundamentals for Facebook, and they have a skeptical article about that. They've got a campaign to stand up for net neutrality. Yeah, it's just a good place to keep up with news on all of these issues anyway, and they're well worth donating to. I have in the past. And they are the ones that originally published, I think, Jerry Barnett, was it? The Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, which is well worth looking up. There's a reading of it by Jerry Barnett, or whatever his name. It's not Jerry Barnett. What is it? Barlow. Jerry Barlow. Yeah. Independence of Cyberspace. But there's a reading of by him on YouTube, if you can find it. Yeah, John Perry Barlow. And it's got him reading it up there, and that's worth listening to. If that doesn't fire your blood for freedom on the internet, nothing will. So yeah. Anything to say about that? Have I lost you, Rin? Or you're muted? Okay. Well, she might be dropping out because her internet.
Yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea I was muted. It sounds great. Everything you mentioned sounds great, and I believe we mentioned this on Twitter. You're also in favor of men's rights, if I'm not mistaken.
I wouldn't call myself a men's rights activist per se. I would say I'm in favor of equality, and I think the more pressing issues, at least in the West at the moment, are men's issues. I think everyone's on board with the feminist issues by and large, and there's a bit of overreach there, but men's issues still get very short shrift. So, yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, I sent you 2 links on Twitter. one link I sent you was from the ncfm.org, which is the National Coalition for Men. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because I mean, a lot of times the skeptics, anti-feminists, anti-SJWs, whatever you want to call the group, I'm pretty sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. But normally men's rights also come up. But then you have feminists who are like, oh yeah, I mean, you guys talk about men's rights issues, but you guys never ever bring up an organization. So I just, tried hunting them down, and I found the National Coalition for Men, and I also found the AFC, ACFC, and the ACFC is the American Coalition for Fathers and Children. And it says children need both parents.
Mhm. In the UK, a really good sort of men's issues organization to sign up to and help is Calm, thecalmzone.net. They, in particular, as Calm is campaign against living miserably, so they really push on male suicide issues, which obviously is important to me. So yeah, they're well worth supporting.
Yeah, because I don't think feminists are help when men commit all this suicide and they go, well, that is toxic masculinity. A man's suicide is toxic masculinity. It's because you guys don't share your feelings.
And then when you do show your feelings, they're like, ew, no, don't do that. I've talked about this before, but I think it's because when men show their feelings, it's often a signifier that they've lost control of themselves in some way. And I think when men lose control of their emotions, it's often seen as being weakness, which you might call toxic masculinity, but that perception seems to come as much from women as it does from men, or dangerous. A man expressing anger is seen as dangerous, and to be fair, probably is to an extent. But yeah, it's all very well telling people to express their emotions, but you can't just silence them when they do. After that, that's not helpful at all.
Yeah, it's like, toxic masculinity is when men don't share their emotions. Well, then men do share their emotions, and they're complaining about feminism, like feminism is a cancer. And it's like, oh, this is male fragility.
Yeah. Or when you object to the idea of toxic masculinity, because whatever people tell you, it is used to attack any masculinity as a whole. And I don't believe that all forms of masculine expression are necessarily bad or toxic, but that seems to be what the argument is. Do you read manga as well as watch anime?
Well, I mean, I do not as often, but I have read I'll know Exorcist or Blue Exorcist, and I've also read what was it? Reborn. I've read all of the chapters of Reborn, and I've read some of Blue Exorcist.
Yeah, I just bring it up because well, there's been a lot of argument and discussion over lolly manga and anime lately. Not my cup of tea, but if you are interested in those issues and the censorship that stems from them, and it does bleed beyond that into censorship of anime and manga and Japanese games and so on Steam and on Sony PlayStation and other places, something you could support is the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, who have defended that kind of expression in the past and might be willing to team up with other organizations in the computer and other media sphere. The CBLDF is a really great organization. I've donated to them in the past, so they have my seal of approval, and they are very, very principled, and they will stand up for free speech. Neil Gaiman has supported them in the past as well, and he wrote a blog in 2008, I think, called In Defense of Icky Speech, or Defending Icky Speech, which is well worth a read for anyone who's interested in free speech and free expression. So I would recommend supporting that. But even if this sort of stuff isn't your cup of tea, then censorship, whether government or otherwise, and the UN has become involved in this issue. We know how that goes, don't we, kids? It does creep. So, it's gone beyond just lolly into, made up characters in comic books and games and so on that are of age, and they're fictional anyway. Nobody's being exploited or hurt. So even if you don't like it, even if you think it's icky, I think we have to always question before, whether it's government or corporate censorship comes in. We should always question it and say, is this necessary? Where's the harm? Who's being harmed? I think a central concept in any law is to ask who's being hurt. The harm principle, which is something that everyone should be educated on and look up as well, I think. That's only the only extra ones I had up. Have you got anything else?
Well, thank you for telling me about the comic books legal defense fund. I mean, I didn't hear of it until now, but the censorship is creeping everywhere. It's kind of a lot like, for example, I also read a bit of How to Make a Social Justice Warrior by Will Shetterly, and he talked about censorship in the science fiction community, where science fiction writers are being censored, and it's being pushed towards the angle of intersectional feminism. And it's kind of like, you also hear about this happening with certain church groups. It seems like it's very ubiquitous. It's not like, video games are just being targeted. It's video games, it's comics. It seems like they went after the science fiction community first. They went everywhere, basically. They went after IT. I mean, Twitter, Facebook, everything seems to be dominated by social justice. I mean, I guess that's the benefit of being really loud.
Yeah, it's tricky because a lot of this stuff happens through social censorship and people saying, oh, well, we don't want to associate with racists or whatever else it might be. And to an extent, you can sympathize, but those people that they're excluding still have rights, still have a right to be published, still have a right for their work to be considered in a fair fashion. I mean, I'm heavily embedded in the role-playing community, and I've always agitated and fought for free expression within the role-playing community. It used to be that we were accused of being Satanists or suicide causers or whatever else. And there was an organization, which technically still exists, called CAR-PGA, the Committee for the Advancement of Role-Playing Games. They still have a site, car-pga.org, but they don't seem to particularly do anything anymore. And we're suffering lots of censorship and unfair treatment within the RPG community. And I wish that organization would do something about that, and it doesn't. So I think, spurred on by this conversation, I think I'm going to write to them and see if we can get something going on that score.
Well, I would like you, even if you were a Satanist, because I mean, I remember watching this video where you were wearing a really cool sigil of Lucifer.
Yes. Well, it's kind of like the ultimate rebel, and I'm a contrarian, and I've started putting occult imagery and things in my videos sort of sneakily to try and trigger the conspiracy theorists, and it has worked a couple of times. So it's good fun.
Sure how many people recognize the sigil of Lucifer, but I recognized it right away because I studied demonology.
Right. Well, I think I'm going to have to go because my mum needs me to move some furniture for her. So we'll have to cut this short there, but it's been a good conversation. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's been a very good conversation. Thank you for having me.
let's plan something for September and October. Do a big push on some of these groups during that banned book week and all the rest of it. So yeah, stay in touch, and yeah, take care, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye bye.